Before anyone comes for me, I want to say right off the bat, Lady Danbury is one of my absolute favorite characters in the show. Adjoa hits up every single scene she's in. I think that her presence elevates Bridgerton and is what saves even the most boring scenes for me. I want to be Lady Danbury when I grow up on such a visceral level that she legit has me rethinking taking up smoking, and I have not held a cig in almost 10 years or even rolled a wrap of kush in more than 5. Yes, people, I prefer getting my eye baked into soft, moist cookies and cakes. So, Lady Danbury has me in a chokehold every time she's just relaxing in a scene, and I'm filled with such intense longing. But in the midst of all that longing, the thought suddenly hit me out of left field a while ago. Specifically, whilst I was doing my rewatch of certain episodes for the video I made about Simon and how his issues aren't just linked to his abusive father, but to his dead mother as well. As I was doing my rewatch, it hit me that the one thing we as the audience have always praised Lady Danbury for is the fact that she is mother. And by mother in this instance, I'm not referring simply to her having birthed a child, i.e. the likes of Violet Bridgerton or Portia Featherington or Araminta Cowper, but more in the way in which the term is used within Black and Latino ballroom culture, specifically in New York, where it originated. Lady Danbury's mother in the power she holds and commands. She's mother in her surrogate role that she plays within the show, taking the characters beneath her wings, teaching them, guiding them, helping them grow, even though the lot of them can be stubborn as hell, and watching the results of how they bloom beautifully at the end of the day. She is mother in the way it counts, but this also means that the show has pigeonholed her into that space, and I personally think that that is a problem. Our first introduction to Lady Danbury back in Bridgerton season 1, after she receives an issue of Lady Whistledown, is when she meets up with Simon to offer him condolences on his father's passing, even though they both know that the man was a dick. She invites him over for the ball she's hosting that night, and he tries to avoid it, claiming that he's only in town to handle his father's affair and then leave. But she's Lady D, and what she wants she most certainly gets, and therefore she's able to successfully pressure him into coming to her ball, which is where he got to meet Daphne for the very first time, and the seeds for their romance was planted. Now, from our introduction to Lady Danbury, we got to immediately connect the dots. She's someone who is important to Simon, whose words he listens to. But unlike with the Bridgerton boys who follow her words out of their good manners, and because, like she tells Simon and us, the audience, she's made herself into the most terrifying creature in the room, with Simon, he respects her because she's the one who raised him, who came to him when everyone else had abandoned him, and reached out her hand to take him into her world, and made him into the accomplished man he was by the time the story started. To Simon, she was mother in that sense of the word, and he bloomed under her care. But Simon wasn't the only person that she's brought under her wing. She does the same for the Sharmas, especially Kate and Edwina. And this is such a conscientious choice within the show because in the books, Lady Danbury only has a passing mention in The Viscount Who Loved Me, which for those who don't know is the second book in the Bridgerton series. And in that book, the Sharmas, the Sheffields, as they were called in the book, were not staying with Lady Danbury, and Agatha most certainly did not sponsor the girls. The role that the show gives her, where she's the one who oversees the sisters' introduction to the ton and kept coming to heads with Kate's control freak personality, isn't one that happened within the books and is solely based off of the characterization that the show has given her and further doubled down on in a way that makes me a tad bit frustrated, but I will come to that in a bit. Then there's the fact that Lady Danbury does the same for Violet Bridgerton as well. And before you try and tell me that that wasn't the case, that Lady Danbury didn't pseudo-adopt Violet under her care and that it is merely friendship, I would like to point out that it can be both. Queen Charlotte as a show went out of its way to show us the affair that Agatha had with Lord Ledger and the regret she felt about it, even as she held on to her memories with him, memories that Violet stumbled on and immediately understood what they were and the significance of them. Agatha is both a friend to Violet, but she also has a burden of responsibility to her. From urging her to tend to her gardens and letting it bloom, to her word of cautioning about Violet's possible relationship with her brother, to her giving them both her blessings after she and Marcus had resolved the enmity between them, or rather more her enmity, as Marcus was in the dark as to the true cause for why his sister was so justifiably pissed at him. And then there's the nurturing friendship and mentorship between Penelope and Lady Danbury that was instrumental in helping Pen come out of her shell and be firm in her convictions in the books, which was equally as important to Penelope's character arc in Romancing Mr. Bridgerton, but which the show skipped because apparently Jess Brownwell, the showrunner for season 3, in an interview with Decider, which I will leave linked in the description bar, along with Time's piece on Mother within ballroom culture, was of the opinion that the previous seasons had heavily focused on Lady Danbury's involvement in shaping the main couples, and they wanted the season to be focused more on her instead, which I agree wholeheartedly with, as it ties perfectly into what I would like to address with this video. But I do not agree that her role had been tied only to the romances. Lady Danbury has always been a character who was as instrumental to the character's personal development as she was to their romance. She was more key to their personal development than she was to the romance. The only time she played heavily into said romance was in season 1, and that's because it was Simon's story. And she was more invested in ensuring he got to have his happy ever after rather than let his stupidity and his stubbornness make him miss out on a great match. Her role with Canthony wasn't as prominent as how she had to step in for Saphne. But that isn't what I want us to focus on, no. The entire reason why I am making this video is because Bridgerton has done that thing, what I personally consider a cardinal sin of television, where they sacrificed a black woman's character growth and arc to serve the interests of others, to lead and guide them to their own enlightenment, whilst never extending her character the exact same growth or arc. There's a lot to be said for how mentor figures in stories rarely ever have teachers of their own. We often see them as old and wizened, like they've learned all they need to learn and have lived the life that they should, and thus we position them within this space where they lack any form of identity, and all they exist for is to lead and guide and inspire the younger generation to unlock the potential that they hold. And that for me is something that we see reflected with Lady Danbury in Bridgerton. Now, I know you might point out that, well, Jess did fix things in season 3 by not having Lady Danbury focus on Pen and Colin and instead gave her the storyline with Marcus. And I really appreciate that. And I think that it is a good start. But at the same time, Bridgerton season 3 still had Lady Danbury take up interest and be invested in both Fran and her match, and Violet too. Matter of fact, her story and the tension she was going through in the season was more centered around Marcus and the fact that he is the one that Violet chose, this brother of hers that Agatha has not quite managed to forgive. I don't think I'm the only one who wonders if we would have gotten that same exploration and peek into who Agatha is if Marcus had expressed interest in someone else who wasn't Violet. Would the walls have come down otherwise? Would we have got the exact same scenario? I don't think so. So her arc was still tied to a romance. But most importantly, and maybe this is just because there's a twist on my name and my ass is greedy, but the conflict seemed just a tad bit forced to me. Like, I am not disputing the anger that Agatha has towards her brother. She's totally valid in that. And as someone who loves to bear grudges, I was team, yes, Lady D, scream at him. No, Her anger at her brother is valid and helps us see more into her past and how she was stripped of her choices and forced to marry Lord Erman Danbury as a child who wanted to escape being tied to this man who her parents had basically made the deciding factor for her personality and everything she was taught and allowed to learn, all for the sake of being his perfect young bride. No, what I found a tad bit forced was the part where the story wanted us to desperately believe that Lady Danbury believed that Violet pairing up with Marcus would lead to her losing her friend in some way. Because the way in which we were meant to read her objections went beyond just a fear that should Marcus inevitably break Violet's heart, she would be caught in the middle of it all. It seemed more like this visceral fear of her friend forgetting her should she be caught up in Marcus's wiles, and that seemed to be what she was afraid of. Of course, maybe you read that part a bit differently or a lot differently, and I would of course love to hear your thoughts in that regard. But to me, it made things seem a bit forced, and the reason for that is because we never really did spend enough time in the story with a vulnerable Lady Danbury. Before we got a peek behind the curtains with Marcus, the show had always positioned Lady Danbury as this strong, powerful, confident, take no shit persona, which on one hand is amazing and is part of what makes her mother, but at the same time, it kind of limits her. It limits her growth, it limits the many ways in which we get to see her. We don't get to see Agatha Danbury as human with the fears and flaws and the weaknesses that she tries to hide. And instead, she takes on this role as someone who will always be larger than life within the story and who exists to guide others in the story. And for me, that is the root cause of my disconnect. Because I don't know about you, but I do believe as humans, a lot of us have been programmed to listen to and take advice from those who have their act together, who have the strength we are desperate for. And so this bleeds into the art we create. But we never consider that when we do that, when we create characters like that, characters who are unbreakable, we don't give room for them to be anything but that. And whilst everyone around them evolves and continues to grow, they are stuck within the exact same rut. And I personally believe that Lady Danbury deserves better than that. Because even with season 3 having shown us Lady Danbury's rage at her brother and fears at losing her friend, we only get 3 to 4 scenes where that is the focus for that. Just having the character tell us that this is what is in her head is very different from showing us the process, showing us her battling these thoughts. And it is a disparity that shows clearly for me because the other characters get these moments. Simon, Daphne, Violet, Cressida, Anthony, Kate, Edwina, Benedict, Colin, Penn, Portia, Eck, even the Mondriches. You know who really doesn't have those moments as much? Agatha Danbury. And a part of me wonders if it's not because she's been built into this larger-than-life persona where the show believes that having her show the messiness of weakness and being allowed to dwell on said moments would reduce her role and impact as a guide. After all, if she's mother, then it's her responsibility and role to stand above them all. But of course, these are just my thoughts. I would as always love to hear yours. Do you agree with me, disagree with me? Let me know your thoughts, please, and drop them in the comments. Like this video if you've watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share this video if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. If you can't, however, do consider checking out my other channels. One of them is my gaming channel, where I put up videos of my playthroughs. The other is my ASMR channel for those who find my voice soothing and are interested in stories on myth and folktales. I have all my channels linked in the description bar if there's something you might be interested in. Whichever the case may be, however, I will see you tomorrow with a new video. Until then, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.